Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us on today's Scale Computing webinar, looking at the hyperconvergence solutions and the evolution of integrated IT systems. Joining you from CMS today, we've got myself, Dan Gorbett, and Andrew Miles, and then from Scale, we've got Ad Decker and Ian Smith. Just a quick introduction as to the remit of today. So we'll begin with a presentation around Scale Computing portfolio and the principles on which that is based. And then we'll move on to a demonstration of the user interface to see how simple and easy it is to implement. There is a question and answer panel on the right hand side of the webinar. At any point, if you've got any questions, type them in there and we'll do our best to answer them on the fly. At the end of the webinar, you will all receive an email with a recording of the webinar. It is being recorded for you today, and also contact details. So should questions arise after the fact, or if you don't get the chance to ask them during the presentation itself, there'll be the opportunity afterwards to do so. And without any further ado, I will pass you over to Ad Decker, who will begin the presentation before we move on to the demonstration. So Ad, over to you if you'd like to take control.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dan. And thank you everyone for joining this morning. My name is Ad Decker, and I'm responsible for marketing at Scale in EMEA. And with me is Ian Smith, who is responsible for pre-sales and system engineering in EMEA. Good morning, Ian.
Morning, Ad. Morning, everyone.
So let's, because we have a packed agenda this morning, it's, I think, very important to start immediately. So thanks for this setting this up. The CMS team did a wonderful job to get everyone on board. And the agenda for today is pretty much focused on a quick introduction on the company Scale Computing, a bit about what's happening in the market, very briefly, but it shows what's changing and why hyperconvergence is important. We will, let's say, support that with some market data from different analysts. And then we'll dive into the portfolio, the technology, and some of the unique selling points that are important for the partner community to be successful with their customers. And then we'll briefly talk about the partners that we have seen signing up with us and the verticals that we are successful in. And we're glad to have Ian on board because Ian has been with the company longer than myself and has quite some experience with customers. So if there are specific questions about those customers that we have that have deployed this and replaced VMware, for instance, he's a good source to contact. And then most importantly, the live demonstration of the interface. And as you will see in that demonstration, it's very important because that basically opens your eyes to what we're doing and why this is so groundbreaking in our view. So this is the agenda. Let's quickly move to the introduction of Scale and basically explain who we are. So Scale is a company that is basically present around the globe. We're very much focused at this moment in time on the Americas, North America, Canada, as well as EMEA. And we're rapidly expanding the EMEA presence. So that's why you will see more and more of Scale going forward. We have a very lively and active customer base that is willing to inform, let's say, new partners and new customers about what they're doing. They are very much focused on a specific number of industries and verticals. And everything, basically what we do is focused around small, mid-market and distributed enterprise. And we'll explain what that means. Now, we have been in this industry for quite a while, both let's say the initial hyperconverged companies have all started around 2012. And lately we've seen that basically all players are now talking hyperconvergence, but there are only a few that made it, let's say, from the beginning, and we are one of those independent companies as we speak. We're very much focused on developing software, so we have unique intellectual property, we have those patented. And basically what we're trying to do is design our product around some key differentiators, which is simple, simple, simple. It needs to work and needs to be high available, and the support is crucial. So that's where we as a company are actively engaged in the beginning of every installation to make sure that everything is working according to our standards and the customers are happy. And that customers are happy can be seen in what we call the Net Promoter Score, which is quite high. It fluctuates per quarter, but we're always, let's say, at 87 or more, between 87 and 91, which is very high, which is, and if you compare it to something like the Apple iPhone, which has a high customer loyalty, we're in that ballpark. So that's what we are, and that's what we do. Our headquarters are in Indianapolis, in Indiana, in the US, and the software development is in Silicon Valley, which is in San Francisco, and we have an office in London, and we're expanding rapidly, as we say. So many customers, many systems, and a growing population of partners, and that's why we have this call today, of course. So if we dive into, let's say, hyperconvergence as a technology and what we are offering, then first of all, we look at the definition. And hyperconverged infrastructure or hyperconvergence is nothing more than the integration of storage, computing, virtualization into a single infrastructure, single architecture. Very simple, very straightforward, and very modern, and very, I would say, a big change for the industry. And that's what we've seen talking to partners and customers over the last couple of years, is that there's still a big number of customers and partners that are basically looking at building up the infrastructure stack via what we call the traditional approach. They buy different servers from different vendors, different switches, different protocols from different vendors. Different storage devices, software and management tools, and that could be VMware or Microsoft Hyper-V. All those different components and different vendors typically have different management tools. That was basically the traditional way of building up a data center stack. Now, over the last couple of years, some of the players have worked together and generated what they call a converged infrastructures. So different easier way, and basically it was sold as everything in a rack. But it's the same traditional approach in a rack, but now packaged in a friendlier way towards a certain application area. So there is some progress, but I wouldn't call it, let's say, that much progress if you look at and of course we are in hyperconverged, and that's why we say that hyperconverged infrastructure is basically everything in the server. Yeah, so it's a true appliance. It has all the compute power consolidated at a higher level. It has all the memory, all the flash, all the disks, and it comes with virtualization in our case. So we typically call this a software-defined data center in a box or in the server or in an appliance. It depends on how you look at it. But that's what hyperconverged infrastructure is. And you see more and more vendors going in this way, and strongly depends on where they come from. Some come from the server space, some come from the storage space, some come from, let's say, the hyperconverged space, like we. So that's basically the road to hyperconvergence as we speak, and many customers and partners are making that transition, and we're happy to be a part of that community. If we look at the market, if we look at the basically activity and the plans for the future, as you can see on this overview, this is data that we collectively got from 3 sources. It's Wikibon, IDC, and Gartner. Basically are all saying the same. So the size of the traditional network storage market, and this is basically traditional network storage. And there's more, of course, in the data center, but that's 45 billion, let's say, globally, annually. And if we look at 2015, 2016, and 17, you can see that converged infrastructure as well as hyperconverged infrastructure is taking over, but still a very small part of the total size of the market. And that's basically what is happening. And what we see, that it's a fight between hyperconvergence and convergence. And that's why we put the arrow here. We're not sure about what the split will be, But looking at the vendors, looking at the market, looking at the responses, we can see that hyperconvergence is gaining traction, is becoming very popular. And we'll explain more what that means and why that is important and why we are playing in this space. So the market is basically saying the same. The vendors are saying the same, and that's what we're following as a company. So if we dive into our solution, it's important for the ones that have not been in the space that long to explain what terms we're using. So first of all, we're talking about nodes pretty much everywhere. And a node is nothing more than a standard x86 Intel based server, and typically in our case either a 1U or a 2U high device. And that node is basically the server itself plus our hypercore software. That's the software that we create that is doing all the magic. So we talk about a node being a server and our software. If we talk about our appliance, it's basically a 3-node cluster, also referred to as hyperconverged compute cluster. And that's what HC3 stands for. If you want to grow, if you want to add nodes, we can do that by adding a node, and then the software will add the node automatically. It's just making sure that it's connected, it's switched on, it will recognize the resources, and it will add those resources to the appliance, or in that case then a 4-node cluster platform. It generates virtual machines that run operating systems and applications. That's number one. Second, storage and memory and disk and virtualization in one package. That's the second. The third is that we are a single vendor. So you don't have to go to multiple vendors, multiple let's say solutions and management tools. It's one management tool, one browser tool going to this appliance, this 3-node cluster, and there's only one vendor that's playing in the space, and that's Scale. So there's no integration time because everything is already integrated. There is no infrastructure expertise needed, yeah, because we made it all very simple. Once everything is running, there's nothing needed there. Of course, the partner needs to add value, needs to make sure that everything is connected and everything works, and everything is working according to the standards that are required. But that's the only piece that is needed. The rest is very simple, as you will see in the demo. It also scales seamlessly. As I said, if you add another node or more, the software will say, okay, this is new, these are new resources, let's add them to the total pile, quote unquote, of resources. And you have more room to do more. There's also no software licensing. So everything is included. That includes virtualization, so you don't have to pay someone else a license fee for virtualization software. And we'll talk about data protection and data management a little bit more going forward, but that's also included. So backup and recovery, disaster recovery, failing over, all that software is included and also presented in that very simple way. And then last but not least, Scale Care, which is our support organization, will offer first year support included as well as installation. So we'll make sure that when it's installed, we sign it off as working, and that's important for the customer as well as the partner. So that's why we are offering and what we are offering. Now we'll go a little bit deeper into the specifications and features of HC3, and this is basically 1 or 2 slides, but we can talk about this for hours if needed, and we'll be open to, let's say, more detailed conversations after this webinar with any partner that is interested in listening to the details. But first, as we said, it's a unified web-based management interface. You go to an IP address with your browser, and that's what you see. You'll see the whole cluster and the remote clusters as well. If we look at the way we've designed this solution, we've done a different job than all the other hyperconverged infrastructure players. We've designed it in a very direct attached storage system way. We call that Scribe. That's the abbreviation of and the name of the way we address storage. It's not done like many others through a virtual storage appliance running in a virtual machine. No, we don't have those. We go direct, and therefore our platform is much more efficient, and that means that you can do more with less. Yeah, so you can basically run more applications, more virtual machines on the same hardware than any other player. We're very efficient, so that's done through Scribe. If you want to know more about how we do that, let us know, and we'll dive into Scribe if you need to. We also have all-flash, spinning disk, and hybrid solutions. And hybrid means, and it's stated here, hybrid flash, but it should be hybrid. Hybrid is basically flash and disk. And we also have, let's say, disk only or flash only solutions. And we'll talk about it a little bit more later on in the overview of the portfolio. With regards to upgrades, software upgrades, these are rolling upgrades and non-disruptive. So you update a node, and then the second and the third and the others. It's very easy to do. As I said, it has built-in backup and replication and failover. We can deploy a cluster within an hour and have VMs live within an hour. And adding a node, we do that in minutes. As we said, no downtime. We just add and connect, and the software will do it. From let's say a drive capacity, both disks as well as flash, we follow the market. So when new drives are available in volume and the quality is according to our standards, we'll add them. So our drives, for instance, range from 8 to 8 terabyte, as well as flash is what is available. And you will see that in the configurations when we dive into that a little later in this presentation. I mentioned the fact that we have a single node configuration a little bit more later on, what that means. One of the nice features, and I'm sure that Ian will explain this, is what we call heat. And basically what it does, we can balance the amount of flash and disk, yeah, depending on the needs of the VM. And Ian will show that. But that's unique because we don't need flash for caching or to make the virtual storage appliances work. Yeah, we use all flash and all disk for disk capacity, period. Okay, so if we dive into the core principles of HC3, the first one is simplicity. It needs to be simple, and it needs to make the data center simpler. That's the first one. Secondly, it needs to be available. Yeah, if you want to have it adopted in data centers or IT rooms, it needs to work, it needs to be available. So if something fails, it needs to continue to work. Scalability, it needs to scale without any hassle. Add a node and you're done. And then last but not least, it needs to be affordable. It needs to do more with less, and you need to be able to offer this as a platform. And in our case, there is a lot included, as we said, virtualization, backup and recovery, disaster recovery, failover, all that software is included in this solution. So if we look at simplicity for the first time, and we look at the stack in the data center, it's very important to see what basically is happening there and what has been happening there. And as I said, that data center stack consists of storage, networking, servers, backup and recovery, disaster recovery, virtualization platform, operating systems of different nature and applications. We know that this is happening, but we also know that more is happening in the data center, let's say, beyond that. We're talking about more and more security threats. There's more and more communication happening between the data center and more devices. Good example is Internet of Things. For many verticals, very, let's say, important to be competitive. Big data, yeah, look at your data, do the analytics, data protection rules, management tools, different cloud scenarios. There is a lot of stuff coming towards the partner as well as to the IT administrator or data center manager. And we believe that we can simplify this. And the way we do that is basically by looking at what the real situation is, because there's not more money coming into those organizations. There are typically no more people getting into those organizations. The complexity based on a traditional approach is getting worse and worse and worse. At the same time, there are more requirements from the business side. So let's say IT management and people that basically are responsible for the IT infrastructure are in a very difficult situation, we believe. And the only way to basically fix that is to consolidate and simplify a big portion of that stack. And that's exactly what we're doing. And that's why we can help. And that's why we can help our partners with let's say, the issues that their customers face. And in many cases, we can also help the partners to be more efficient and to focus on the more, let's say, productive and interesting and maybe even, let's say, margin richer areas of the IT stack. So what we do is basically we replace a big portion of this with HC3. And altogether, if you look at that and combine that, this is the whole stack. Yeah, and we are helping to make it simpler. Hence why simplicity is the first important pillar of our offering. Now, we talked about the interface, and then we said that Ian will present this and go through this in more detail. But this is the key to what we're trying to do here. Yeah, so make sure that you're listening to that part of this presentation. The demo is crucial. And in my case, for the first time I saw it, it was mind-blowing. So second is availability. Yeah. So as we said, we start with a 3-node cluster, just like most vendors in this space. It's done for availability, and it's done to make sure that things continue to work. And with the included software, we can make sure that when something happens, like a disk failure or a node failure for that matter, the cluster will continue to work. And that's a fundamental part of what hyperconvergence is all about, and therefore a fundamental part of HC3. From a scalability point of view, as I said before, and we'll repeat it again, if we want to scale out, and basically this is a scale out architecture, we can add nodes on top of the 3-node cluster and add a 4th, a 5th, a 6th, and so on. At the same time, we can scale down. Yeah, for some deployments, either if you want to create a disaster recovery target and basically configure a node with just disks for capacity, you can replicate to that node, or you can backup to that node. That can be on-prem, that can be remote. That's one deployment of the single node configuration. So scaling down with the single node configuration. Another possibility is if we look at a more distributed environment, this could be your virtualization solution in a smaller environment. So less availability, but the same functionality from a virtualization platform point of view. It will run virtual machines. It will do all the things that are necessary to basically do backup, do recovery, do disaster recovery, and replicate to another location, to another cluster in a more central location where all the data is, let's say, held. So if we combine the story so far with this, the feature set and the software capabilities, and if we look at the possibilities of having a single node or having a cluster or a bigger cluster, you can see here that there are many possibilities to deploy, and therefore it's a very scalable solution. And even if we say that we are focused on small and medium-sized businesses, we're getting more and more pulled into what we call the distributed enterprise. So large organizations that have, let's say, in some cases, hundreds of locations, and want to basically use this and leverage the standard features that are included. And the standard features, as we say, are virtualization, a very simple interface, no people that on site that are necessary because it can be managed remotely, and it's that simple. We can scale from a single node to a 3-node to more nodes, either in the remote office or in the remote store or in the central data center. So that's basically, there are many deployments. This is just a few that you can imagine are available. At the same time, we are seeing more and more managed service providers using this technology to offer service to their customers. Yeah. So what can be done within a big organization with a central location going to remote offices or remote stores can be done by an MSP. Yeah, this solution is ideal for MSPs to offer, let's say, DR as a service type solutions to the ones that want to have an on-prem solution, but at the same time want to make sure that their data is stored somewhere locally in a country and offered as a service by an MSP. So many deployments, as you can see. Now, last but not least is, why is this more affordable than any other solution? And I think it's done because the design itself is fundamentally different from the rest, and therefore we need less resources to do the same, and therefore we are more competitive from a pricing point of view. That's the first thing. Secondly, because we are very transparent in pricing. So there's no, let's say, secret about our pricing. You can find our pricing back in the US. You can find our pricing back here in EMEA in different currencies. Yeah, it's very transparent because we have nothing to hide. And in many cases, we can see that in some of the competition, they don't want to talk about pricing. They want to talk about pricing when pricing is a topic, but we believe that pricing is always a topic. So very transparent, we do more with less, and we're reducing costs where it makes sense. As we said, we consolidate the data center stack. You don't have to pay VMware, you don't have to pay NetApp, you don't have to pay EMC, you don't have to pay Veeam or any other backup and recovery company, and you don't have to pay Zerto for that matter to do DR. Yeah, this is all included and has rich functionality for most deployments. So that's from an affordability point of view. If we look at pricing, as we said, and before we do that, we've announced this week an extension to our portfolio, and well, you can read about it in the press, and you can read about it when you're interested in what we're doing. Basically, what we've added is a 2U high device that has more storage, more CPU power, more memory. So basically, it expands the possibilities of HyperCore as a software solution in our appliances. Yeah, this is a massive step forward. So we're expanding our portfolio on the high end. At the same time, in the existing portfolio, we've added dual CPUs as well as new all-flash configurations, and we'll show a little bit more in the slides that come now. So, as we said, we're very transparent in pricing. We have pound prices and euro prices, but just to explain how we present our portfolio, on this page you can see the 1100 and the 1150. The 1100 is the disk-only configuration, which is basically there's no flash in there. Our solution, because of the design, does not need flash to make it work. Yeah, you can have a disk-only configuration, ideal for some deployments that are not performance, let's say, sensitive, but need capacity. So this is a good example of the entry-level model with the entry-level price based on disk-only configuration. The 1150 is a hybrid solution. It has both flash and disk, ranging from, let's say, smaller components to bigger components, and therefore it'll increase the price because we're using more expensive components and with a bigger size. So depending on the CPU, again, depending on the memory, depending on the choice of SSDs and hard drives, it determines the price. But this configuration hybrid model starts at this price. So that's the 1100 and the 1150. Now looking at the expansion of and this is in euros, looking at the expansion, we've added dual CPU configurations, and you can see here the three columns, the 1150D, the 1150DF. Those two are based on the same configuration as this one, but they are different in terms of, let's say, deployment and using of components. The one on the left, the first one, is also a hybrid model, but you can have two CPUs. Yeah, so the same as the 1150, but the D has dual CPU. That's a hybrid model. The one in the middle is the all-flash one. So here we make the choice of SSD only. It's an all-flash hyperconverged solution with virtualization included. Very unique proposition at this moment in time, and very much wanted by a partner community as well as our customer base. and new customers, of course. And last but not least, that's the bigger one, the new addition, similar in terms of CPU and CPU power, more memory possibilities for a bigger cluster, and more disk in there. So instead of 1 and 3 in the 1100 series, we have a solution here where you can have 3 SSDs and 9 hard drives, and therefore the total capacity from a disk point of view is ranging up to 72. So imagine you have an 8-node cluster. That's a massive solution in this space. So that's the portfolio, and of course we have those prices available in euros as well. So if you're interested in a more detailed overview, CMS and Nscale can provide this, no problem at all. So looking at the partners, and this is a very interesting one, because if you look at the partners in the verticals, there's quite some similarity there. So and if we look at, let's say, partners globally, the typical partner is either a small VAR or a consultant that is the trusted advisor to their customers, very much focused on virtualization and hyperconvergence, and uses us as the single vendor in this space. And we see many of those being very successful as we speak. The second one is the MSP, or a hybrid partner that really wants to use this platform as a managed service or a cloud service to their customers. Yeah, and I gave the example already as DR as a service, but it could also be infrastructure as a service. The third one is the big VAR that is, let's say, slightly bigger than all the others, the majority of the VARs or partners that we're leveraging and using. And they might have chosen one of the HCI vendors or one of the existing vendors that have an HCI solution and want to see and help getting into SMB and distributed enterprise with an alternative solution being Scale. And we see more and more of those popping up and looking at this, because, and we'll see that in some more case studies that we will release later in the year, the distributed enterprise in certain verticals is really a big winner for us. And that'll, let's say, have people following us in this space from a partner and customer point of view. And then there's what I refer to as the maverick partner, the partner that wants to differentiate, that is focused on open source type solutions, Linux, Red Hat, SUSE, and Scale with KVM and virtualization and hyperconvergence can help those organizations to step away from a traditional approach to a hyperconverged infrastructure solution. Now, and if we look at the verticals, that's very interesting. And I say, yeah, we're addressing all verticals, and of course, because this is pretty horizontal solution. But we see a lot of success in education and retail and manufacturing and legal, especially in areas and verticals where they don't have that many people, let's say either from a cost point of view or in general that they don't have that many IT folks, and they want to leverage a solution that is simple, scalable, affordable, and available. So that's the partners and verticals. For a Scale partner community, we believe we have a solid partner program, which is called the Scale Partner Community. We really want to work with our partners as a part of the community. We encourage cooperation. We encourage competition, of course, although it needs to keep that in hand. But we're very much focused on a 100% channel model, a two-tier model, hence why we work with CMS Distribution in the UK and Ireland. Yeah, we believe that the time to a deal could be days, and I have big discussions with people inside the company and outside the company, but I've seen deals pop up and closed in days. And I have to be honest, those were weeks, but there were 2 weeks. So it is possible to close something because it's that simple and that compelling. As we said, it's software-defined data center for everyone, virtualization included, hyperconverged infrastructure. Because of the design, we're not shy of a wide variety of workloads. Yeah, it's not just a VDI or a VSI solution that you see with other players. Yeah, this can basically cope with databases and Exchange and SQL if you want to. And as I said before, backup and recovery, disaster recovery, and failover is included. A very compelling proposition for partners, we believe. So if people are and partners are interested in becoming a part of the Scale partner community, We have some documentation available for you. It's on the left is the program overview. At a high level, it explains what the proposition is. We have a more detailed reseller guide to go through the different levels and discounts, etc. And then we have an addendum that talks about discounts for doing business with Scale and CMS. And that's basically the end of the presentation and the last slide before we switch to Ian for the demo. And I realized that I've been talking, but I wanted to make sure that all the information is basically transferred and explained. And getting back to what the summary is, so there's no need for buying VMware. There's no licensing for other components that are necessary, as we described in backup and recovery and disaster recovery and failover. There's no need to buy SAN or NAS external arrays, which is massive. No issues with protocols because it's all integrated and hyperconverged. No dedicated management service, no dedicated virtualization administrators. No overbuying of resources or hardware or software licenses for the years to come. Yeah, you just buy what you need now. No certification for VMware, no certification for Cisco, no certification for SNIA. You don't need a PhD. It's very simple, and Ian will show it to you now. Ian, let me switch to you.
Thank you very much.
Find you in the.
I think I'm
okay.
here. Excellent, thanks, Ad. So before I start, can I just make sure that you can see my desktop okay? You can see my web browser open.
Yeah, maybe you can see that, yeah. Maybe maximize it.
That's, is that okay for everyone?
Yeah, looks good for me.
Great, perfect, okay. I want to do my normal trick of going through the demo and not showing my desktop. So thanks for that, Ad. Obviously, there's a lot of good content there, lots of information to take in. The simple part is actually managing HC3, managing the cluster or a single node. You can see here that I've got a web browser open. The management interface is HTML5 compliant, so pretty much any web browser on any platform will allow you to manage a cluster or a single node. So, you know, right from the outset, there isn't any additional software or management tools required. Also, to get to this point as well, so where, you know, I've logged into one of these nodes in this particular cluster I'm logged into here. But to get to this point, the setup and configuration is very simple. So I talked about earlier the initial configuration taking under an hour, and the majority of that time would be taken up actually, you know, physically installing the kit. A cluster requires very little information for configuration, basic IP address information for each node. You then initialize the cluster. And then within probably around about 10 minutes, depending on the number of nodes and capacity, you can then log into this interface. So my unit of measurement for most things is a cup of tea. So certainly the amount of time it takes for me to drink a cup of tea, I can actually set up a cluster and be ready pretty much to start creating VMs straight away. So you can see here that this is a 3-node cluster. I happen to be logged into the first node, but actually I can log into any node in a cluster and still manage the cluster as a whole. So I'm never managing an individual node. Also, that means that there's no single point of failure as well from a management perspective. All nodes are equal in the cluster. So I can log into any node and get on and manage the workload. You can see up here that as soon as you log into a cluster, you get an overall view of the health of the cluster. So this is what we call our head-up display here, our dashboard. At the top here, you've got the gas gauges, which give you overall cluster usage. And we also use a traffic light system as well, so you can see instantly what's going on and if there's anything that you should you know, take a look at. So you can see here that from a RAM point of view, we're consuming over 66% of the RAM available in this cluster. So that's just telling me that, you know, that's something I may need to address and take a look at. And a little bit further down here, we've got a graphical representation of each node. So this is just what's memory resident in each node. So again, very easy for me to take a look at the workload that's running. Very simple. And also I can switch to the disk view as well.
And if you go back to RAM, you can see the virtual machines in there. So they're stacked up.
That's right, yeah. That's what's memory resident on each node. Yeah. And if I select the VM as well, then it would change the focus further down in the screen to that particular VM as well. Yeah. Okay, so switching to the disk view. So this is an 8-drive system. And as Ad talked about earlier on, talked about the hybrid nodes. This particular node configuration has got a combination of SAS and SSD disks. So you can see individual usage here. This isn't something you need to really concern yourself with too much particularly, but the only time you may want to look at this particular view would be if you need to replace a disk. And as you'd expect, this would then just simply show you which disk this needs replacing. So very simple at a glance to see the health of the cluster, what's running. Okay, so let's just jump in and let's start creating a VM. So if you can imagine that we've taken 10 minutes to configure the cluster, we've had that cup of tea, and then we can pretty much virtually start creating VMs straight away. So if we just create a VM here for you. Oops. I'm going to put this into the CMS group as well, so we can actually apply multiple tags to a VM. So that means we can apply different rules, or we can stop and start groups of VMs by using tags and so on. Select the operating system. So I'm going to stick with Windows in this instance. I'll stick with 2 CPUs, but actually throw a bit more RAM at this particular VM. And this is the only disk configuration required. And this is in its entirety. Ad talked about the fact that there are no storage protocols, there's no storage management or configuration, and that's absolutely true. And again, offline, we can probably go into a bit more detail if we want to dive into the Scribe technology, that cluster block storage engine, which Ad touched upon earlier. But this is the only storage configuration, and we've really simplified that whole stack. So we're not just hiding, you know, the creation of RSCSI targets and LUNs and the multipathing and so on. That simply doesn't exist in our platform and in our storage stack. So the only storage configuration is when I create a VM, how many disks, how big do they need to be? And then lastly, I then select the ISO that I want to boot from to install the OS and hit create. And that's as complicated as it is. It's very simple. I'm just going to change the focus now, so I'm going to just go down to that CMS group which you just created. I've already got a VM here that I set up a few moments ago prior to the demo, but I just wanted to show you the replication piece, and I'll come back to that in a minute. I've actually set up my VM here. I can go back in here and I can actually change any of the configuration if I wanted to. So if I wanted to add disk, add additional network interfaces, very simple to do that.
So Ian, every VM is one of those blocks. Yeah.
That's correct, yeah.
And everything you want to do with that VM is basically in that block.
Absolutely, yeah. So you can see here that you've got the option to stop and start the VM, console to the VM itself. So obviously you need to connect to the VM to do the initial installation or configuration. You've got your summary view, which again mimics the actual gas gauges at the top of the cluster view there, but actually this is per VM metrics. So whether that's CPU, IOPS, disk usage, and network bandwidth. Then we've got the device view, which we just looked at a few moments ago. And then we've also got the snapshot view as well. So let me just take a step back. Ad mentioned some of that auto tiering technology, and actually we don't actually need SSD in our platform to actually turn the lights on. And we've got many customers out in the field that are actually running production workloads without any hint or sign of SSD, and that comes back to the efficiency in the storage stack. As we've just seen a few moments ago, though, this particular node or cluster, should I say, does have SSD available, and we can actually tune and actually set the flash priority per virtual disk per VM. So this is not across the cluster as a whole. This is not as a whole for that particular individual VM, but it's the virtual disk per VM. So I can actually really tune the performance per disk. So for example, if I had a SQL server, I had a transaction log disk, for example, I wanted to make sure that that receives or gets the best performance, then I can actually tune the flash priority for that individual disk. So I can actually set that to 0, the flash priority to 0, and that means that all of the data will be re-tiered or initially written to the spinning disk only. But anything above 0 means we then start to use that heat auto-tiering technology, and then we actually, you know, based on the usage, based on how the tiering algorithm views each block, will then tier that accordingly. And we can also set that right the way out to 11. And the serious point about setting that to 11 means that you can actually guarantee that all of the data on that disk will be moved or written to the SSD tier, thus guaranteeing performance, the best performance that's possible. And that can be done on the fly as well.
So again, a very good example of the simplicity that we want to design into every part of the solution. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, going back again to some of the slides that you showed earlier, you know, we didn't need to create a separate, storage pool or create a data store, for example, that had different performance characteristics. You know, none of that that management overhead is even required or even exists in our platform. It's simply create the VM and then assign the flash priority per VM, assuming you've got hybrid nodes, of course. So really simple to set up. And again, you can change that at any time. And then some of the other great features. So again, because we're not hampered with some of the legacy technologies, so we don't have clustered shared volumes or data stores with virtual disks sitting on top of those clustered file systems, as files, for example. Everything's done at the block level. Then that means we can be, very efficient and lightweight. And some of that translates through to some of the things we can do with snapshots, for example. So when we talk about snapshots, what I don't want you to do is think VMware snapshots or the traditional snapshots. So we support 5,000 snapshots per VM. And again, every time we take a snapshot, we're only actually going to take a snapshot of the metadata, and then subsequent snapshots will only actually update those reference counts to those particular blocks that have changed, for example. And also the same when you actually clone a VM as well. We don't duplicate blocks. All we do is copy the metadata associated with the actual virtual disks and the VMs themselves. We can actually schedule the snapshots as well, so you can think of these as VM level backup. So I can actually apply a schedule that we've configured earlier. And then beyond that as well, we can then actually enable replication as well of that VM. So every time we take a manual snapshot, or every time a scheduled snapshot is triggered, then that will be automatically replicated to this other target here. So in this here example, this is actually another cluster, but as Ad talked about earlier on, this could be from a single node appliance to a cluster, from a cluster to a single node DR, or it could be between single nodes. Again, the actual feature set is identical, whether it's a single node or a cluster. If we switch across to that other cluster now, I would have thought it's probably available. As you'd appreciate, there isn't any data associated with it, so it doesn't take long to replicate in the first instance. But you can see that's already available for me. And if I take a look at this VM that I replicated earlier on, if I want to gain access to that, once it's finished, then I can just simply clone that VM and gain access to it instantly. So very simple, even in the DR scenario. And also the failback as well is very simple. We don't require you to reseed that particular VM. We'll actually only replicate back the changes, the deltas at the block level. So that means that failback is also quick and efficient. Okay, so some of the other options that we need to probably take a look at. Some of the things that were built into the platform that are really popular, with the customer base. Things like updates. So we talk about high availability. That translates to updates as well. So in the case of a cluster, and what we call rolling updates. So there's no downtime when applying firmware. And also because we own the entire stack, we look after the entire stack. That means that we can actually update all elements of the virtualization and storage stack in one go. So that means that we intimately understand the hardware. That means that translates into a really reliable experience. So again, updates are seamless, no downtime. And also remote support as well. We haven't really talked too much about support, but that's really an integral part of the solution. And Net Promoter Score is up around about the 90 mark. So that should give you an indication of how good our support is. And actually, there aren't any nerd knobs, for want of a better phrase. The interface that you've seen so far is your, this is your entire interaction with the platform. I mentioned earlier that we use KVM, but actually, we could be using any hypervisor technology under the hood. You're never exposed directly to KVM. And because of that, our support needs to be genuinely excellent, and which it is. And we can actually provide access. Sorry, Karen.
No, go on. Sorry. There are some questions coming in. I'll
oh, excellent. Great. Yeah. Okay, so well, I'll just cover this point, and then perhaps we can switch gears and answer some of those questions that are coming in. Yep. But to provide support, we've got this phone home option. So I know you may have seen this on some other products, but it's always been an integral part of our platform from day one. And this allows the cluster to connect to our support team in Indianapolis. And the great thing about our support team is that they're all sort of level 2, level 3 engineers. So invariably, the person that you talk to on the end of the phone or communicate on email initially will be able to resolve that issue. And they will simply issue you with a support code that will then open an outbound SSH tunnel to our support team. And then they can get straight on and resolve any issues. So really simple. Going forward as well, I talked about adding additional resource. So if we wanted to add a new node to the cluster again, it takes about 10 minutes for a new node to come online. There's no downtime, there's no reconfiguration. All that happens is that this interface would show an additional node in the head-up display, and that's it. Okay, so essentially everyone's had a training course on HC3, and I talks about the fact that there aren't any accreditations or certification courses required. There just simply isn't. Again, anyone who is capable of managing a single server, give them sort of 30 minutes with the interface, and you'll know everything that you need to know to successfully manage a highly available platform such as our HC3 here. Okay, Ad, I don't know if you want to switch gears a little bit and let's take a look at some questions.
Yeah, there's a couple of questions coming in. So the first one is, how do you protect the data within a node? I'm guessing you're using RAID. Can you explain a little bit more?
Yeah, we haven't really touched too much upon how Scribe works and protects data. So in a single node, then we stripe and mirror the data across disks. So that means that, obviously we would duplicate in any blocks. And in the case of a single node, then we'll make sure that obviously both copies of the data don't reside on the same disk. And also when a disk fails as well, assuming we've got sufficient capacity, then we'll actually re-protect that block as well. So if you, for example, if 4-drive system, drive 2 failed, then the data that was on that disk would then be redistributed across the other remaining disks in that particular node. And that's automatic as well. So talking about that, the way that we handle failures, disk failures, is automatic. All you need to do is physically, resolve that issue, replace that disk. We handle all the recovery of data and so on, and bringing, that particular device back online, whether that's a disk or a node, for example.
Yeah. The other question from Guido is which also asked the first question is, how do you cope with supporting environments where internet access is not possible?
Yeah, so we do support what we call dark sites, and we take that on a case-by-case basis. Ideally, we like to have remote access, remote support access, should I say. But we understand that there are, instances in certain verticals that, obviously, for security reasons, don't allow and provide for that. So we do support that as well. Okay.
So what's the block size for replication?
The block size is by default a 1 meg, but that's variable, and so that just depends on the profile of the data.
Yeah, and do you support VMs running Microsoft Cluster?
We don't support clustered shared volumes. I mean, that's a really good question, actually. Certainly the latest, well, actually for some time now, actually, most of Microsoft's applications such as SQL and Exchange do support application high availability without the need for clustered shared volumes. But that's a really good question, actually. As you've just seen here, we don't support storage protocols natively. So in that instance, for Microsoft, then we'd need to use the sort of the non-shared disk HA capabilities of those particular applications. Or if you really wanted to, you could actually create, set up a VM to actually provide access or provide that, cluster shared volume in that instance.
Okay. And once we have assigned storage to the VM, can we shrink or expand on the fly?
Not on the fly, no. So again, currently today, if you want to change any resource allocation, then you actually need to bring down the VM itself. So not the cluster, but that individual VM. And that's the same for whether that's CPU, RAM, or disk.
Okay. Okay. Maybe
you can disconnect VMs and things like network interfaces on the fly, but certainly other resources, then you need to actually shut the VM down. So you can see if I just go there, I can actually change that resource allocation if I've got the VM fired up, for example. So let me just go to one that's already running.
Yeah.
Let's just take a look here. Then if I go to that view here, then again, it won't let me actually change that while it's running.
Yeah. Okay. And the maybe you can show also the remote cluster view. I think this is 7.3. Yeah?
It is, yes. Yeah. So yeah, this is the remote cluster view here. So we support 24 remote partners, whether that be or remote destinations, whether that be a single node or a cluster. And although this is not showing any data currently, but if I wanted to actually select that robo destination, I could just simply select that. It would then open up the web browser accordingly and let me log directly straight into that particular remote target. And that happens to be a single node actually, so that's quite fortunate. So you can see here, this is a single node DR target in this instance, but all the features are identical except the fact that we've just got a single node. Everything else is the same.
Okay, so we're close to the hour. Actually, we're on the hour. So we did the presentation, we did the demo, we answered, I believe, all the questions that were addressed on the Q&A. So that basically leaves us with thanking you, Ian, for the demonstration, thanking everyone for joining, thanking CMS for setting this up, and yeah, next steps, if you're interested in the partner program, if you're interested in more details, don't hesitate to contact CMS or us. And with that, I thank everyone for joining. Bye-bye.
Yeah, so thanks to Ad and Ian for providing that presentation and the demonstration for us. As they've mentioned already, there will be opportunities to contact us for any more information. As I said at the beginning, the webinar has been fully recorded from start to finish, and you should all receive an email containing a link or a copy of that webinar recording, and then also some contact details for ourselves at CMS for Scale. So yeah, there's contact and Scale opportunities in the future. So again, from us at CMS, thank you very much.